Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Disability Landscape. I'm Charlie Brose. Today I'm here with my regular co-host, Mark Knudsen. Mark, we've got a interesting gentleman to talk to today who's been a advocate in the Twin Cities area for quite some time. Why don't you go ahead and introduce him?
Yeah, our next guest, I've met him probably been about 7 years now, and he's really involved in. He's got his hands in a lot of things, and I'll give you a couple of his titles. He's a disability advocate, along with a disability service provider. I'd like to introduce Darrell Paulsen. Hey, Darrell, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Charlie, for that great introduction. But for those of us that are going to see this either now or at a later time, I am a man who lives my life from a power wheelchair. I have a COVID beard. I haven't shaved for probably a few months. I typically wear a hat and glasses. And I'm sitting in my kitchen next to a button wall, and I can explain the significance of the buttons as we go through the interview. So,
Okay. So besides an advocate and a disability service provider, what are some of the other titles or things that you are involved with, Darrell?
I primarily I like to do community involvement type stuff. So I serve on two committees at the airport for travelers with disabilities, and I also serve on two committees under the Met Council and Metro Transit for transit providers and transit users. So I try to connect those dots and make it so that it's a one ticket ride. So if you buy your ticket on the light rail, it's usable all the way until your destination spot. And I try to utilize other forms of transportation like the airport as well, so we can integrate some of those services to get you where you want to go and where you're coming from.
So for Darrell, for the airport, are you? I mean, I assume, of course, you're involved in getting, helping the airport itself, servicing the needs for people with disabilities. Do you also then work with the airlines once someone's on a plane?
Yes, we do. From the moment we enter the airport to the moment we leave the airport, that is all airport property, and that includes the agents that we're working with. That includes the airlines that have service agreements and use our hubs as their main thoroughfares as they transport people across the globe.
Okay. And then as a
but here's the interesting thing about that, Mark. We also
yes.
We don't only just talk about transit in the airport. We also our work also includes making sure that the restaurants and all the things that you see out the airport, like your shops or like even the art installations that you're looking at as you're waiting for your airline, we make sure those are all accessible. Those are all interactive with and for people with disabilities as well.
Okay. And then when someone, for those people who may have not had the need for it, but like for us in wheelchairs, for us to get on a plane, you have people there that have the aisle chairs and help you get into the aisle chair, onto the plane, all that.
Absolutely. My partner and I are both in wheelchairs, and we often have to use aisle chairs, and we use flight attendants and actually it's actually a third party vendor that does all your lifting and all your transporting.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Okay, it's a third party vendor then. Okay.
Right. But they adhere to airport rules and airport regulations, I mean, which are mostly regulated by the feds.
Okay. So it's not one airline that's supplying it. It's actually the airport that's getting that vendor to bring people in to help all the airlines.
Yeah, that is correct, because it's the airport's responsibility from the moment you hit the property to the moment you leave the property.
Okay.
Okay.
It's
Charlie?
the airlines are just part of it. They're just vendors in a large scheme of airport services.
Yeah, I've had a lot of experience with that, unfortunately. And, you know, you feel like you're being wrapped up like Hannibal Lecter to get into the plane.
You do, and
Uh,
but they're in a hurry to push you out though, and not really know where your shit is, right?
Right, exactly.
You know, you're here at your spot, you know.
Well, at least they come and get you off the plane. There's been a few instances where that has not happened. So, are you then familiar with the project called Sunflower at the airport? Then
I am familiar with that. We just adopted that I think a couple months ago. That actually is a program that works with folks mainly. I think it started with folks with autism or the folks that had developmental delays or some kind of auditory or visual impairment that caused them to need a little bit more assistance. And Minneapolis is one of several airports in the country that has adopted this program. It's fairly new, so I'm very pleased that you guys know about it and want to know more about it.
yeah, it's listed as a program for people with what they consider hidden disabilities. Again, you're right, with autism, mental disabilities, sight and hearing impairment. It sounds like a fascinating project.
It's supposed to be like a subtle reminder to airport staff and airport personnel that these people need a little extra assistance navigating through the airport. And so it's supposed to identify to us airport staff that, you know, just be mindful of these individuals and give them a little extra attention or a little extra help if they ask for it.
That's a really cool concept there. You work also with the Transit Commission, the Metropolitan Council, and are you involved or at all with when they're planning new rail lines, like the new Southwest Rail or the Botno, to make sure that, you know?
Yes, I don't get too excited about like the Southwest rail line or like the Botno line, the big rail. But I am very heavily involved in Metro Transit and transit in general. I serve on the Gold Line. I am the co-chair of the Community and Business Advisory Committee, which is to connect businesses and providers and residents and consumers of transit services to each other so that we can talk and we can make the BRT bus rapid transit the best lines that they possibly can be. What I mean by that is that our lines will be in 75% dedicated space, meaning that they won't have to have the ability to be in mixed traffic. So that is a huge thing, because if you look at other lines across the country, they don't reach the 75% dedicated lane space. They typically reach about 45 to 50% because that's what the feds require you to get a match for. But in Minnesota, we like to do things up and beyond a little bit better. So I'm very proud to say that I've been involved in both the Rush line and the Gold line, and those lines will be in operational. The Gold line will be in operational in 2024, and
Okay.
the Rush line will be there in 2026.
Nice. Mark?
No, yeah, Darrell, I was going to ask you, where are you, where are you originally from?
I'm originally from South Dakota. I'm a
What? South Dakota?
South Dakota, yes. I'm a good old country boy. I like to think myself as being a country boy, but I actually grew up about 14 miles outside of the city of Brookings. My family used to operate a large dairy farm, and we had a small rental farm that we had outside of that property. And I was there, I would say, even though I was there only a short time, about 10 years, I would say those were my most formative years in my life. And whenever I talk about going back to my community or doing something back for my community, I think about my grandma who lived in Brookings for 30 some years, 20 some years in the same apartment. I think about, my relatives that still live in Watertown, my cousins, my uncles, and everybody. So if I was ever able to do anything for my community or back to my hometown, it would be to make that connection in Minnesota and South Dakota. And we do provide a little bit of services in both states.
Okay. How did you end up in, as they call from out there, the big city, the Twin Cities?
I came to the big cities because we always used to come up to the cities to party.
Okay, now we know.
So whenever you would come, you would go from the small town, you would go to the cities, and I had some relatives that lived in the cities too, right? So over the course of as my years were being, my adulthood was being formative, and I was like, 14, 15, 16, we began to just come up more and more, and and finally they were like, well, and then I thought about going to school in Mitchell, South Dakota it was purchasing and inventory management, and the instructor told me he wasn't gonna it would be too hard for me because I wouldn't have services and whatnot. So eventually, then I convinced my mom, let's not talk about Mitchell, but let's talk about the Twin Cities. And so then we moved to St. Paul, and I got my first apartment in Eden Prairie by myself when I was like almost 18. So I was,
Oh, wow.
I wasn't even 18 yet.
Okay. And then how did you, then from there, how did you get involved with the advocacy and stuff like that? So you go from an 18-year-old living in Eden Prairie, and now you're involved in a lot of advocacy work. Connect the dots.
Well, what really happens is I'm 18 years old. I don't have no services. I don't have no providers. I don't have no real supports, right? So what ends up happening is I'm enrolled in school. I go to school. I wake up at 5:30 in the morning to go to school, and I end up falling out of bed, and nobody's there to help me, right? So what happens? The neighbor downstairs hears me fall out of bed, right? She comes up and picks me up, and I go off to school. Away I go, right? So we begin to forge that relationship of each other, and saying, well, I know you need help, and I don't know what services are out there, but I'll help you with them if I can help you with them. So long story short, I end up partying too much in that apartment. I lose my apartment. I end up having to move back with my family, which is about 30 miles away in West St. Paul, right? and
Yep.
and into an inaccessible apartment, right?
Oh,
And so it didn't work for
yeah.
them either. So they were like, we gotta find somewhere else for you to be. Let's figure this out. Da 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 da. So I just looked at an ad in the newspaper and seeing that this apartment was available in South St. Paul. It was a 1 bedroom. He called it a house. It was a 1 bedroom house, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I'll try that, right? So I called that guy, and the landlord happened to live right next to me. So he immediately took a liking to me, and we forged a probably a 12-year or 14-year relationship with him being my landlord right next to me. During
Okay.
that time, I was able to figure out how to provide services to get my family paid to take care of me
Okay.
and to get some hours done so I could at least get to the bathroom and take a shower when I wanted to, things like that. So
Okay.
I would say for about the better part of 2 years, I just relied on friends and family to provide care for me before I understood how to navigate the services that I now provide to other folks.
What would you, for someone who may be watching this right now that might kind of be in your situation, they're that 17, 18-year-old still living at home, maybe with mom and dad, but they, they know they want to live on their own, but they don't know how to, what the steps are. What's a good resource for them to start, who to contact to start putting things in place to be able to live on and be on their own?
That's that different emotions and different mixed thought processes of how what's a good age do we start transitioning folks to thinking about living on their own if they have the ability to even do so, or if they have the desire to do so. What are the supports that we can give them as a community to make sure that when they do go out on their own, that it's a success, that they don't have to come back to mom and dad. And it's okay if they do come back to mom and dad, because on average, your kids will come back to you 3 times in their lifetime before they're totally out of the nest. So just understand that if your kids have come back to you once or twice, you probably got one more time yet. So it does happen. So what I would say is just look for the resources that are out there in the community. One of the best places I would start for a general resource list of anything is always United Way 211. They've been a huge partner in my success of my organization and with the programs that I support and offer. So anybody, if you can dial phone or look on the web, go to 211 United Way. It's a good start. Some of the other places I would look at for resources about independence or independent living would be, I would say, start with your independent living services in your community, like maybe MCIL or the SILs up north, or even connecting with, I know maybe Mark, you might be familiar with this, or Charlie, are you guys familiar with CTEC? It was a county initiative with county providers. And
Oh, really?
it was driven in schools generally, but CTEC had a wealth of information. They had a wealth of resources, and that's where the conversations would have generally started, back in the early 2000s or the late 90s when I was starting this work.
Okay.
I hope I'm giving you enough information. I can give you a lot more. I was prepared to actually talk about some current legislation, and
Let's
actually
do it.
let's
I think we're
Yeah,
at
we've
that.
got
I think
about
we're at,
a week We got about a week left in the session.
You know, I was going to talk about some good stuff like marijuana legalization, sex
Oh.
for people with disabilities, and all kinds of things, and family supports for all of us. I mean,
Yeah, talk about that. Yes,
I was going to
please.
talk about really controversial stuff. In our parenting legislation, actually, I don't know if Charlie, if you know this, but Nikki and I are the proud parents of a beautiful daughter. She's 9 years old. But when Nikki was pregnant, she was often told by the county and often told by agencies through either their actions or even their direct words that it was her fault for getting pregnant.
Oh my.
So basically what they were doing is they would deny her services based on the fact that they didn't know how to provide them or based on the fact that they said it was her fault. Okay.
Oh,
and
that's horrendous.
So even when Allie was full term and a perfectly healthy baby, 6 pounds, 7 ounces, and she was scheduled to be a C-section because we didn't want Nikki's body to have to go through the tremendous recovery period because she used her trunk, the trunk of her body to move her body from place to place and to get in and out of bed and stuff. So even after the C-section, and she was told that she couldn't increase her care level by 4 hours, even though the doctor had authorized it and DHS would okay it. The county public health nurse still denied it, and she went months without care. We've actually went 9 months without care of us total because we have a daughter that has no disabilities. So what we did is we helped with the help of the Republican controlled Senate, and at that moment 4 years ago it was the Republican House too. I believe we worked with Representative Hamilton and some other folks, and we crafted a bill that would give 40 hours of additional services to people, to parents with disabilities that had children that didn't have services.
That's a pretty big victory right there. And we commend you because you're helping all the other people with disabilities beyond yourself with circumstances such as yours. And that's great.
Absolutely. And the reality is the reason we do that is because we're 4 to 5 times more likely to have our kids taken away just because we have a disability label on our educational record. It doesn't matter if we can provide services or not to the child. It means because we have a disability and it's written down on a legality on your school record, you're 4 times more likely to have your rights terminated as a parent. Not even reunification. We're talking permanent termination. And so we're working with the courts right now to hopefully remove some of that stigma and to allow for due process in the courts to allow for a reunification of parents and children.
Okay, I think we're starting to wind down here on time. For the last minute, is there anything you'd like to speak about real quick, Darrell, or get the word out about?
Well, I would just like to thank, the whole disability community over the last year or so. It's been really challenging because of the COVID-19 and the pandemic. I would like to thank us as a whole and how adaptable we have become in our meetings and our being able to get our messages out there and being able to be effective leaders. So I just want to thank you, Charlie, and you, Mark. Of course, I got to thank you, Mark, because Charlie told me I had to. Otherwise, he wasn't going to air this. So
he hates when I start crying. So he babies me. he knows how to handle me, and I like it. I like it. Honestly, I like
Well, you guys worked good together there. You know.
it. We've known one another since high school, so
Oh, that
we've been kind of stuck with one another.
well, that's even better. I like to hear that.
Yeah. So, okay, Charlie, you want to wrap it up then? I guess.
I will do that. So again, we want to thank Darrell Paulsen for being with us today. Great information. Darrell, if you're going to be finding him out and about fighting for your rights as a disability person with disabilities, and we're all appreciative for it. For my partner, Mark Knutson, I'm Charlie Brose, and this has been another great episode of Disability Landscape. We'll see you next time.